It's the 8 o'clock hour and you're still on Morning at NTV Friday's edition, giving you another perspective into other industries. For example, the aviation industry here in Uganda. When people hear aviation, most of you actually only hear Uganda Airlines, and that's where it starts. And that's where it ends. Unfortunately for you, you're going to be learning that there's more to the aviation industry in Uganda than meets the eye. So welcome to our Kickstarter. Is aviation a good career choice in Uganda and improving the sustainability of the aviation industry? Now, just to give you a backbone of it, more than 90% of air traffic in any country is determined by the size of the economy, which of course is measured by the gross domestic product of that country. As Uganda economies start to grow more and more, the country's air traffic is also growing, and more air operators are subsequently attracted to benefit from the passenger as well as the cargo traffic that we do have here in Uganda. The International Monetary Fund projected Uganda's GDP to grow by 5.2% and 7.3% in 2018 and 2022, that's respectively, and anticipated the country's air traffic flows in the same positive direction. But after decades in abyss, the revival of the Uganda Airlines was met with a lot of pomp and a lot of grandeur back in 2019. Then the 2 Airbuses that came in thereafter, it caused Ugandans to have hope yet again in our, our national career, but aviation as an industry. However, the timing couldn't have been any worse, because then COVID-19 came in and it came with a world lockdown on any form of transport, road transport to air transport. And so it's been lots of hiccups that the aviation industry has been going through. However, this morning we are joined by the aviation industry guru, and that is Mr. Mike Mukula, Captain Mike Mukula. He's a pilot, but he's also a politician. We want him to help us understand more about aviation as an industry and as a career choice. They say that youth don't have jobs, there are jobs in this industry. Let's find out. Good morning to you, Captain.
Good morning. How is NTV this morning?
NTV is
to be with you.
NTV is very fine, and my name is Priscilla. Nice to see you.
Good morning, Priscilla.
So the first question is, Captain, how did you pick interest in the aviation industry, later on join it to the level you're at?
Well, let's say that the East African Civil Aviation Academy was within the range of my training during my studies in primary and secondary in Teso College. And I had the opportunity to see pilots or aircrafts flying in and out of the airport every day. Secondly, my uncle, the late Jonathan Ikochu, used to live in Entebbe, and I used to watch British Airways, Air France pilots arriving at the airport and looking very smart, and I definitely picked the interest to go to and join the aviation sector. And I'm privileged to be a pilot now, and professional for that matter. And I'm proud that aviation is growing in the country.
Find out, for the long time that you have been in the aviation industry, what has been its growth and contribution, especially towards Uganda's economy?
Well, let's look at it this way. The aviation industry, or air travel, contributes about 8% of our national GDP. And it also contributes, in terms of employment, if you look at tourism, for example, about 7% of our employment ratios in the country. So aviation, or air transport, is interlinked to tourism, and air transport is part of the transport industry in the country, or the transport sector. I want to say that there is no nation, especially Uganda, which is landlocked, which can be able to grow its economy without the air transport sector. Because being a landlocked country, the only means of transport in and out of the country we have is either road transport, railway, water, and air transport. And I want to say that the aviation sector or the aviation industry is one that we must maximize, especially as we climb towards the middle income status. Many people will continue to use air transport to interconnect with the outside world, especially the global network into the Far East, into China, into Europe, into the northern continent of United States of America. And intra-Africa trade can only be grown if we maximize air transport and prioritize air transport as a means of coordinating the movement of people and persons between the nations.
Coordinated transport, and you've mentioned nations, which begs the question, within the region we do have the sector growing heavily, especially for our major neighbors around us. You have DRC and on this other side Kenya, and if we're going to grow as a region, what is our growth rate in comparison to the other regional players that we have in the aviation industry?
Well, Uganda has now acquired a national airline. We have now the Bombardier aircraft, which are 4. We have the Airbus A330, which are 2. We need to increase the numbers so that we can be able to match countries like Ethiopia. If you looked at Ethiopia, for example, Ethiopia has got approximately 120 aircrafts. And if you look at the airport, the Bole airport, it is the hub of Ethiopian Airlines. The other second largest air transport player in the region is Kenya Airways, which has got close to 50 or 60 aircrafts. They have reduced the number recently. But if you look at Uganda, the numbers of pilots, the number of aircrafts, the number of light aviation aircrafts you have in the region is starting to grow and has grown tremendously. We have the aviation master plan, which was constituted in 2014 for 20 years, up to 2033. The aviation master plan looks at expanding the airside, the passenger terminal, the air cargo terminal, and improving and ensuring that the movement of traffic between Entebbe and the city, the hub, is tremendously improved. And that's why you have the Entebbe Express Highway. It's one of the best express highways you have in the African continent. What am I saying? And to get you into context, when you look at the region, East African Community, we have 7 nations. The DRC Congo is 91 times the size of Rwanda, with a huge population. It is 11 times the size of Uganda. But if you look at the connectivity between Uganda and the DRC Congo, it is minimum. And yet potentially the DRC Congo is one of the richest countries in the world. It has got 14 of the largest minerals or the most precious minerals in the world. Interconnecting the countries, the 7 countries, is very important. So we can only do that at the current rate by using aircrafts. Until and when we build the road transport and the railway, air transport is the most viable option you have between, say, Entebbe and Kinshasa, and Entebbe and, say, Bujumbura. If you look at Uganda Airlines now, flying between Entebbe and Bujumbura, it is full going in and full coming out. That shows you that the passenger growth is very high, and the other countries that are surrounding Uganda. So aviation and its growth has got a huge potential.
And growth, let's keep it there. The Uganda Airlines, in assessment, we seem to see it making losses ever since inception. Is it supposed to have a break-even point? When is that break-even point that we should be getting returns on the Uganda Airlines in light of what you have just shared?
Uganda Airlines is an investment that is very important for the country. But from its inception in 2018, 1 year after, we had the COVID-19, which impacted on all the aviation or the air transport all over the world. Emirates grounded most of its aircrafts, including British Airways, Lufthansa. Uganda Airlines was then at the stage of negotiating the BASAs, what you call the bilateral air service agreements. And it was called, or it came in at the time when COVID was now, which had had a major impact globally. So what you saw as the losses was a result of the grounding of our aircrafts, because we could not fly into areas where we had negotiated and agreed on the bilateral air service agreements. But it is important for you to note that the Bombardier aircrafts fly very well within the region, into Bujumbura, into Nairobi, Mombasa, into Dar es Salaam, Juba, Kinshasa, and Johannesburg. And you note that the entry of Uganda Airlines comes in at a time when air transport, or the fares between, say, Nairobi and Entebbe, were at its peak. If you looked at the charges between Entebbe and Nairobi at that time, Entebbe remained the most expensive short route anywhere in the world, which was anywhere close to about $700. That has now dropped to about $250. So it's a major and a tremendous saving for the country and for the travelers. Now the routes are very competitive, the prices are very competitive, and I want to say that Uganda Airlines has now been able to employ most of our pilots who have now moved to fly in the neighboring countries, our engineers, the cabin crew, and you look at the multiplier factor, the forward and backward linkages into the economy. Look at it this way, and let me give you the narrative. The service or the food that is eaten on the airline is all from our farmers. As you know, Uganda's got 48% of East Africa's arable land. Our comparative advantage is in agriculture. What am I saying? We now feed people, passengers who fly in and out of Entebbe using our local produce, our local fruits, our meat, our milk, and so on and so forth. Secondly, you now pay for the tickets in Uganda shillings. In the past, you had to evacuate part of this money in order to pay these foreign airlines which were flying into the country. So it's a major saving for the country in terms of foreign exchange. And once the airline grows, I want to assure you the sky is the limit. We must ensure that we support Uganda Airlines and ensure that we fly Uganda Airlines at all times.
Well, of course, the sky is the limit. The plane can't go to take us to heaven. But looking at Uganda Airlines, nevertheless, there's the element of ground handling. And I know that the airlines has now picked up self-handling from DAS handling. And I believe that that's a step in a positive direction. How does that then translate into the development of the aviation industry?
Aviation is the most highly regulated industry in the world. Cost cutting is a means of increasing the efficiency and savings in the operations of an airline. So therefore, when you go into self-handling, you save tremendously, because most of the biggest ground handling company is foreign. It's from, I think, the Middle East. Now, that means that part of that money would be going to the Middle East because they've got to make profit. What am I saying? You've got to note that Uganda Airlines now, which is self-handling, can now be able to make tremendous savings by ensuring that the equipment it has acquired, the service of the people that they employ, and also the cost-saving ratios will now maximize the profits that the Uganda Airline will gain. So I really support and I appreciate and commend the board of directors, the CEO and the management team for having gained access to self-handling by acquiring the equipment. That has made Uganda Airline now more efficient. Gacha Alimabaga, they are still moving in to ensure that more cost-effective means will be used and employed to ensure that the airline becomes profitable within the shortest period of time.
Captain, but in regards to just analyzing the year 2023, in the last 6 months, we've had a serious saga when it comes to handling with the airlines, and you've had corruption scandals and people sharing videos on social media platforms because of this whole self-handling that we are getting into. How does the airline and the aviation industry at large actually make sure that the word corruption is not stamped on the industry?
The only way you can do that in any sector, not just the aviation sector or Uganda Airlines for that matter, is to increase the internal efficiency measures. I think that the airline has come a long way. This is a nascent industry. This is a nascent airline. It's still new, and we are learning on the job. Most of our people, as you note, Uganda Airlines collapsed way back during Idi Amin's time. When the East African community collapsed in 1977, the regional sectors or countries had to develop their own airlines. And as you know, Uganda Airlines had never at that time picked up its own national airline. The aircraft they were operating became obsolete. I want to say that the Airbus A330 is brand new. All the two aircrafts. The Bombardier aircrafts are all brand new. So in essence, if you look at the Bombardier, it operates and its fuel efficiency is 27% cheaper than most of the equivalent carriers of the same nature. That's why you find that the systems that have been employed, the strategy that has been put into place by management, as driven by the board, is one of the best you have in the country. I want us not to demonize the airline at an early stage. Let's not politicize a national carrier, and what we need to do is support a national carrier. I have a master's in business administration. My thesis and my dissertation was on management challenges of African airlines. We must ensure that at all times we ensure that the airline is devoid of political interference. That is one of the key points that I was able to analyze in my dissertation. What I would want to encourage our people to look at is that the airline currently as it is, despite the challenges and the competition, is operating in a very competitive environment. The African continent has only got about 2% or 3% of the air transport percentage of passengers carried globally. So we have a narrow speck within which we can grow. I would want to encourage Africa to be positive. We are growing, and the aviation industry, which was alien to Africa, is now amongst us. Let's support our national airline, and I want to assure you, all those areas that you are talking about can be developed if we continue training. And we have Uganda Aviation Academy, which is now training and professionalizing the crew that will serve in the airline, from ground handling, for example, aviation security, AVSEC. They go into areas like cabin crew, cargo handling, passenger care and services, and later on we're going to move and we collaborate towards training pilots and engineers. The moment we have an efficient management system of our local and indigenous people who are properly trained, very professional, Uganda Airlines will grow from strength to strength like other African carriers like Ethiopian Airlines, which is being managed from the top to the bottom by Ethiopians. I am happy to note that Uganda Airlines, from the board to the lowest person who cleans the aircraft, is Ugandan. We should be proud of that.
Something to be proud of. The other thing that I believe we ought to be proud of is the fact that there are other aviation players now in the market. It's not only the national aviation, but you do have private players that have joined the industry. But the challenge is that there seems to be a small market to which they're all attracted to tap into. I was at the Aviation Expo last week, and I asked around for private aviation. If I wanted to fly to a certain destination, for example, Chisoro, I'd have to cough $200. Please note, you said Ugandan shillings. I have to pay $200, and that is a one route ticket. It's not a return ticket, even that. So there seems to be some factors in between there that are actually failing the private sector from fully being absorbed by the other sectors, embracing them.
I think that one of the key things that will embrace aviation and fast-track the growth or create the traction of the aviation industry faster is infrastructure. We have approximately 36 or so aerodromes in the country and airstrips. If you look at the eastern axis, you have the Jinja Airport, which needs to be invested on, which needs to be improved tremendously. You look at Tororo, you look at Soroti, those are averagely what you have in the east and the other smaller ones. But the most important area we need to invest in when you look at the parks is the tourism sector. If you look at Kenya, for example, it has got a huge private aviation industry. Why? Because they have many aerodromes, airstrips, some which are private, some which are government. But what is important for you to note, that the inflow of tourism into Mombasa, Savo, and all these airports is out of the tourism sector. We need to ensure that we attract more tourists into the country. Uganda has some of the best game parks, game lodges in the whole of Africa and possibly in the world. It's voted the best CNN tourist destination in the world. We now need to ensure that we integrate this sector of tourism to the aviation sector. We need to ensure also at all times that the infrastructure, the road transport, electricity, which has grown tremendously, we have excess power now. These are contributors to the aviation sector. We need to reduce the cost pushers. These cost pushers in terms of air transport are the ones that we need to deal with in ensure so that we can reduce the destination or increase internal air transport or internal tourism in the country in order to ensure that the costs go down. But currently now we have about 14 or so local air transport companies in the country, in the private sector. This all, as you note, is all private sector led and driven. But we need to have regular meetings with the Civil Aviation Authority, the Ministry of Transport. We need to work closely with other sectors. And I want to assure you that Uganda is one of the best tourist destinations in the country. We can, as the private sector grows, as the economy grows, air transport will drop tremendously, and destinations like the ones you've talked about of Kisoro will be an easy destination and affordable for the average Ugandan who is able to afford to transport himself or the family or the internal tourism to that direction. I want to say that we have a bright future as a country. From where we have developed, where the country stabilized a few years back, the number of tourists flying into the country is growing day by day. Domestic tourism has grown also. If you look at some of the game lodges which have been built, very impressive, 5-star and of a global standard. The future is bright for the country.
But they're not affordable for an average Uganda. But what the tourism sector has done is to domesticate tourism. How can we domesticate the aviation industry to also support tourism? That's a food for thought for you. But away from that, the next financial year, 2023-2024, offsets tomorrow. How has the industry been catered for as far as budget allocations and programs or plans are concerned in the next financial year?
In the budget, I did read there was an allocation for Uganda Airlines. Some money has been set aside to procure mid-range aircrafts, the ones which can be able to fly, say, between here and between Entebbe, say, and Dubai. Entebbe and, say, Cairo, to the West African countries like Ghana, Accra, Lagos, and so on and so forth, because the range of the Bombardier is limited. It's more of a mid-range aircraft, an aircraft that can fly between Entebbe and, say, Nairobi, Mombasa, and so on and so forth. The mid-range would take an aircraft like maybe a Dreamliner, and I think a budget allocation has been made to that effect, which will now cover between the Bombardier and the Airbus A330. Secondly, I think government has also allocated some money for the procurement of cargo aircraft for Uganda Airlines. Being a landlocked country, we would like to ensure that we very quickly reach Amsterdam, one of the best destinations for the flowers. As you know, Uganda has got some of the best roses in the world, so that we can fly, my apologies, we can fly also our fruits, our fish into the European sector and increase our export. That budget allocation also is being complemented by government of Uganda, I think, in their projections to rehabilitate, improve, and expand other aerodromes to international standard like Arua, Kasese, Gulu, and so on and so forth. A budget allocation has been made to that effect. Thirdly, you know that the airport in the Albertine region is about 90% ready. It is going to be an alternate airport for the country because Uganda has not had any alternate airport apart from Entebbe. Our alternate airports designated would be in the region Nairobi, Kigali, or Kilimanjaro. But the entry of Kabale Airport, which is in the Bunyoro region, is one that is going to take a lot of cargo, is going to take in a lot of passengers, and you can now have direct flights to this airport. It means, therefore, that we join countries like Kenya, Tanzania, which have got alternative airports. A budget allocation was made to that effect under the medium-term expenditure framework, MTEF. So the aviation sector in this MTEF, or the medium-term expenditure framework, has been catered for by the Minister of Health, Minister of Finance, and I want to say that this allocation will tremendously transform the aviation or the air transport sector in the country.
There's hope at the end of the road, which then begs a final question this morning to you, Captain Mike. Is the aviation a good career choice for Uganda today? And what are the present opportunities that the young Ugandans can tap into?
The aviation industry all over the world has got pride because you fly all over the world. For example, I am happy that as you see me dressed today, we are going to graduate several students who have been studying in the aviation industry. Those who have been doing cabin crew, ticketing, those who have been doing aviation security, those who have carried out training in cargo handling, and so on and so forth. We have been working very closely with the IATA, the International Air Transport Association, and ICAO through the Civil Aviation Authority of Uganda, and we have an ATO. We are training many aviators now, and many of our graduates have now joined Emirates, Qatar. We have got students who have come from Ethiopia, from South Sudan, Eritrea, even as far as Pakistan and India, from the DRC Congo. We are now become a hub of aviation training in the country. What does that mean? For Uganda, we will now be exporting quality rather than quantity. Rather than exporting house helpers in most of these domestic houses in the Middle East, we will now be able to export labor because labor is exportable, but of a higher value. Who will work in hotels, who will work in Qatar, in Emirates, in working international carriers. This to me means that the aviation industry in the world is growing. Uganda training aviators means that our young people will have now an opportunity. To answer your question, the aviation industry has got a bright future, and I encourage many people to become aviators like me and be proud to be pilots, to be aviation engineers, to be cabin crew, to work in other auxiliary departments, or to support air transport, not only in the country, but all over the world. I want to say that the aviation industry has got a bright future for our young people.
The sky is the limit, of course. Thank you so much, Captain Mike Mukula, for eluding us in the bright future of the aviation industry. We shall leave you to go officiate the duties of passing out the new entrants into the aviation industry. I trust that that conversation has been enlightening to you, and aviation is definitely a good career choice and path for you, given what he has mentioned, that we are positioning ourselves to be a training center, training hub, as well as, of course, putting out opportunities there that are actually tapped into by anyone from Africa, and so you can get your studies here and go work anywhere on the continent. That's definitely good. We're going to be taking a short break, but when we return, we do have Ivan Kewalunyoro that is also going to be joining us here on Morning at NTV with another conversation. Do stay with us.